Welcome back to Unfiltered Unspoken. I see that smile. We love to put a smile from the intros.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. We want to welcome you to Unfiltered Unspoken podcast. Janessa Finley-Ford. She has life experience to tell from Love Behind Bars. I'm going to let her come up and introduce herself. And then after that, City Sid is going to kick off the first question. Welcome, Janessa.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So I am just like a lover at heart. I am an animal lover. I'm an adventure lover. I just really love life, despite whatever wild and crazy twists and turns and curveballs life throws my way. I had a almost 20-year career in the criminal justice field before I began helping other people, walking side by side with individuals through adversity, using a mix of psychology and mindset and functional medicine coaching and all the good stuff to master the art of being human, so that when life does throw us these curveballs, instead of being in pressurized and heated situations, you can come out the other side shining bright like a diamond. It's my belief that we all have fiercely radiant souls, and we are meant to live and embody that no matter what. And so that's become my personal passion and mission in life, is to help people be in their fierce radiance and feel as though they are the master of their life.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us this evening. So with everyone, we understand that the kind of meat and potatoes of your story here, goes into adulthood. But with everyone we speak with, we do like to start at the beginning and hopefully tie together some things that, may have brought you to where you ended up. So tell us a little bit about your household, how you grew up, and if you experienced any trauma in your adolescent years.
Yeah, this is a great question. Usually I interweave it into the intro, but I am a farmer's daughter. I grew up in a really traditional upbringing, things that people, used to be the norm decades and decades and decades ago that we don't really see this day and age anymore. So I actually began my education at a one-room country school. I had no other kids my age in my class. There were 7 of us students there total. I grew up on this farm in a very traditional Catholic family in a really small town in rural Nebraska. I like to say I grew up in the country of cows and corn. And there was plenty of cows and corn, way more cows and corn than the people. And I transitioned into public school in town at first grade. So I went like a preschool year and a kindergarten year to the country school. I absolutely loved it. And going into public school actually was quite a shock, because the country school was such a family-oriented environment. There wasn't bullying. We all looked out for each other. And public school was very different than that. So I was exposed to, typical school and kid things that I had never experienced prior to that time. Growing up, I did experience my fair share of bullying. I had a traumatic event happen to me at the age of 8, actually. And I know you asked about teenage years, but I repressed the memories. So while this situation occurred when I was 8 years old, I went through life and I had really challenging time with relationships. I was a pretty spicy teenager and child. I didn't trust easily. I was pretty defiant and rebellious, and I wanted what I wanted when I wanted it. And I really poured myself into athletics an awful lot in high school, which kept me out of probably some other means of getting myself into trouble. But what I really did do was the angst that I didn't know what to do with. I internalized it, and I developed an eating disorder at the age of 17. And I went through that journey very dishonest about what I was experiencing and telling people I was okay and I was fine. I was healthy when I wasn't. I got married at 21. We got divorced a year later, and the eating disorder played heavily into that marriage not working out, and also my dishonesty around the eating disorder. And so that's kind of the bulk, because even, you don't have a fully developed brain until 25. So I lived a lot of life before 25. And the trauma that I did experience in my childhood, I did not actually recover memories of that until midway into my 30s. So it was decades later when that came back to me. And then I really had the opportunity to lean into healing that. But I think it's really incredible and inspiring of how much we can heal, such as the eating disorder, along our path before we ever truly know what is at the root of all of that angst within our being. Because while it was not a short time with suffering from that or living that eating disorder, it was about 7 years, but I was healthy before any of those trauma memories came back to me to deal with. So, and then it was really easy to understand why relationships were the way they were with myself and with other people.
And this is what we love, because we want to bring awareness to the audience of things that we go through from childhood into adulthood. I want to jump back and if you're not comfortable, let us know. At 8, you said you went through something very traumatic. Are you open to talking about what you went through at 8 years old?
I don't talk about it a lot, solely because, like you mentioned, I know being trauma informed, how triggering that can be for other people. So I will just openly say it, it was a sexual assault of nature, and I would really feel like I'm honoring the listeners out there of leaving it at that.
Okay.
Understood. Now, obviously, it kind of seems like that's what kind of probably what pushed you into, your eating disorder. Now, if you don't mind, or if you are comfortable speaking with, what particular disorder did you have, and were there any, particular reasons that you may have found in your healing that was the method that you chose?
So yeah, anorexia and bulimia. I really started anorexia first and then developed more into bulimia along the way. But not like maybe a year within, it turned into bulimia. And then what was the follow-up question about?
Were there any particular reasons that you were able to find that, those were your methods of choice?
Yeah, I think it had a lot to do with control. There's so much that I couldn't control around me, which is very, very common with eating disorders, to have that element of control. Addiction runs in my family, so I feel like there were genetic components to an addiction, even though it wasn't, drugs or alcohol or some of the more common forms that you may see out there. Also, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Enneagram. It's a personality typing system, but with the Enneagram, there has been mapping done that Enneagram 1s, because of the anger that personality structure naturally is fueled by, and the Enneagram 1s internalization of their anger. It's one of the most common personality types to actually suffer from eating disorders or present with eating disorders. And so I'm an Enneagram 1, whether or not that, there's so many different personality structures out there, whether you buy into that or prescribe to that belief or not. But I feel like I had a lot of different elements at play. And I was just so resistive to letting people really know what was going on in my inner terrain. And so what I know about eating disorders now, and the dopamine response and the feel good, that instant feel good that comes from the binging and purging, I feel like it was just a method to self-regulate what was a lot of internal pain that I didn't know how to access or deal with.
Okay. So I was going to ask, I know we're not going to talk, but do you feel like that internal pain came from being 8 and then when you were older, it just started to internalize?
Say that one more time. Part of that
When,
cut out. Sorry.
oh, I apologize. Do you think some of that pain came from when you were 8 and as you got older, it started to internalize within you?
I do. In hindsight, I mean, it's always easier looking back, right? But after remembering the memories and going through the actual trauma healing of that situation in my 30s, which for me, the way that the memories came back to me, I was really emotionally expressing and feeling like an 8-year-old. Like there was so many emotions and so many tears and things that just weren't my normal natural self in this grieving process. There was an awful lot underneath that trauma. So once it was cracked open, there was a lot to process through and a lot to release. And so I definitely feel like having all of that repressed and stored within, my subconscious and within my body not only created a lot of the internalization of pain as I saw in the eating disorder, but also the like physical pain and tension within my body. I had different, like some knee pain as a kid. And I feel like I didn't always have a sporting injury, but I definitely dealt with injuries very regularly. And I was playing sports. I even played collegiate softball my first year in college. So I was really, really active while also, really depriving my body of nutrients. So there's a lot of different probably contributors to the physical pain as well. But I do believe that trauma absolutely creates the physical pain that we experience too.
Absolutely. Now, was this something that you kind of sat on as a secret, or did you have supportive family, or did anyone kind of notice, your decline in your mental health? What was that like for you? Did you have any support at all?
So my senior year of high school, a cousin of mine who's about 4 years older than me showed up at a basketball tournament. And I'm like, oh, he came to watch me play. How cool. And he pulled me aside and he said, Janessa, I know you have an eating disorder and I know that you need help. I'm here. I'm in your corner. He gave me a book. And yeah, I was completely secretive. Like, aside from that, I was like, please don't tell anybody. I'm fine. I have everything under control, right? All of this scenario. So I don't think it was very long after that my mom and dad found out, and they were supportive, but I was very, very deceitful about it. So while they wanted to make sure I was getting help or stable, I just said I was stable. And, I'm also like into all these athletics and performing at a high level. And so I think it was really challenging for them to tell from the outside, based upon my activity level and different things as well, how I was or wasn't doing. And then, it was a few months later and I left for college, and then I was on my own. So I was very secretive about it. I went to counseling for a very short time, my freshman year of college. My mom asked me to do that. And it was in the winter. So for people who don't play softball has a fall season and a spring season. So there's not a lot of time off at the collegiate level of softball. And so I was trying to do counseling like in that short amount of time that we had, from essentially like Thanksgiving to Christmas, and not miss a lot of practices. And so it was in the winter time that I did a little bit of counseling. And then I just felt like it wasn't important, and I wasn't getting anywhere, and it wasn't doing any good. I was the one not doing the work, right? Like, I can see that in hindsight. But really coming out the other side of my eating disorder, I don't recommend this to listeners, but I really processed through it on my own in my own time. And I think that my brain reaching maturity, or almost reaching maturity at the age that I discontinued the eating disorder, was very pivotal in that. But I bought lots and lots and lots of books, and I was my first criminal justice career job at the prison. I was working at a prison. I'd bought a house. I had a job that I cared about. And I had this realization that if I couldn't get my poop in a group, and I had to go to residential treatment, I didn't know what that would do to my job and therefore to my home and to my life. And that really lit my fire to start showing up for myself in a different way. And so I started buying books, and there was a workbook, and I don't remember the name of it, and I destroyed it when I was done. But that workbook like changed my life because it really made me look at myself. I had some challenging conversations with my parents to, like clear the air of things that I had been harboring from a young age. And bit by bit, like I gained my strength, and I gained back a healthy, normal relationship with food. And then I started developing healthier relationships with myself, other humans, and life just kept getting better and better. And then once I had the memories come back to me from that initial trauma and process through that, it really allowed my life to be completely different.
Beautiful. I wanted to ask, did you see a significant weight change going through your eating disorder? And if so, did your parents notice the weight change? Because obviously your cousin noticed it. So I'm wondering if anyone else noticed it.
Yeah, my parents did notice. I don't recall the exact, like I could tell you what the discrepancy was from what I weigh right now today. I think I lost around 15 pounds. And I'm like 5'2.5". So I'm really short, 15 pounds on my structure, and I'm really like petite, small boned. So it shows much differently than on someone larger than me. And they did notice, they did ask. I also, prior to my eating disorder, like I had mono my freshman year, and I laid around and slept, and I gained some weight, which wasn't a large amount. I've never been obese or overweight. But then my sophomore into junior year, I leaned down a little bit, and I was faster and more athletic and stronger. And so I feel like I had really kind of hit a happy space there. And so from there to where I was, I would say I lost like 10 or 15 pounds total, which was noticeable. But I definitely played it off that, I was just trying to be the competitive athlete that I was and watch my nutrition. And yeah.
Now, was there any significant fallout with your health, during that period of time?
I had chronic bronchitis. There were things for sure, but like nothing. Well, I take that back. I was hospitalized for bronchitis. It would have been after my freshman year of college. So I had a detached retina randomly from PE class my senior year of high school. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it detached the retina of my right eye. And so when they found that, they're like, you need surgery right away. So I had surgery for that. And then I injured elbow playing softball my freshman year of college. And I needed to have the surgery that you can kind of see the scar on my elbow from. And it was a few weeks prior to my elbow surgery. I was hospitalized for bronchitis. I would get bronchitis all the time. Someone would have a cold and it would turn into bronchitis for me, and I would be sick for weeks. And I had a tolerance to prescription medication. And that's actually what prompted my holistic healing journey into alternative healing modalities, because going to the doctor and getting prescriptions for bronchitis didn't ever actually get to like the root cause of why I continued to have bronchitis. And I'm like, I'm going to the gym, I'm eating my vegetables, I'm eating my chicken. So this was a little later into my 20s when I was healthy, and I was still getting bronchitis all the time. So that was present for me through most of my adolescence, and then continued on even after the eating disorder stopped. And that's when I decided I wanted to pursue some other means for healing, because being tolerant to antibiotics when you're, 25, 26, like, what is life going to look like for me in 10 years? That frightened me. And so then I started seeing what other options were out there.
Okay. I have one more question on this subject, and thank you so much for your transparency. This will be so much information for someone that is just going through a similar life experience to you. So we definitely appreciate it. I wanted to ask, when you let go and told your parents everything, how did they receive it and moving forward? And was that a big relief for you, telling them? And did you wish you would have told them sooner?
So I don't know if there was a point in time when I told my parents everything. I think I gave them what was palatable to me and didn't make me feel too exposed, a little bit at a time. But if the question is pointed to, and I think that this is the most important part, actually, like that workbook and some of the conversations that were birthed from doing that work, I was so nervous and I was literally like shaking. I was frightened. It was like worse than any job interview or any sporting event nerves that I had ever felt in my life. And I called and I did it anyway. And I was shocked because I thought for sure that they would be defensive or upset or blame shift, and believe me, I had a lot of accountability to hold from that situation and the choices I had made. But it was actually really well received. And we, both ended up apologizing and, like, just, okay, let's move forward from here. And it certainly shifted a lot within the relationship with my parents. But also, that wasn't like me coming clean. It was me and my healing process. And it was just a step at a time of what, okay, I've come to terms with this. So now that I'm centered on it and I'm clear, now I'm able to have that conversation with them. It wasn't ever like fully transparent, wide open, here are all the things. And hi, I'm living in a dumpster fire right now with an eating disorder. I'm fine though. I got it. It wasn't a conversation like that, but it was well received. And I'm really, really grateful for that looking back, because I would imagine that's probably one of the hardest things to receive as a parent, knowing that they did the best they could with what was available to them in raising me. And it wasn't though they had intended for, me to experience the things I experienced or cope with them the way I coped with them. And then to hear me assert, my opinions and my perspective and what I assigned as blame at the time and different things, and to receive it in love, like that takes a real human to be able to just open their heart and love and receive that and give love back.
Absolutely. Now you did say that, this whole experience, kind of led you into your career choice, working in the jail. So tell us a little bit about that. How did you decide that you were going into that lane? And then, what was it like? I'm not sure if you were at a men or women's jail, but either way, what was that experience like for you, coming from farm? Like, I'm not sure, what you were used to being around, but I'm sure it was a totally different environment. So tell us a little bit about how you got into that.
Yeah, super relevant. And I appreciate you picking up on that because it's night and day difference for sure. I really had a desire to help people. And I thought I was going to go to college for substance abuse counseling. I got to college and I'm like, man, I have my own eating disorder. Who am I? Like, how hypocritical is it for me to want to help people deal with their addictions when I have my own? I think I need to rethink this. And then, from a logical standpoint, I'm like, okay, so money was a factor because you have to work as an intern and get however many hours to even get certified, as a substance abuse counselor. And I'm like, that seems like a road to just being really broke and life being really stressful. I think my life is stressful enough. Let's recalibrate a little bit. So I had double majored in criminal justice and psychology, thinking I would do substance abuse counseling. And then I decided to drop my psychology major to a minor because I was able to graduate a semester, like almost a year early. I had 2 classes my last semester. So that was like just the factors that factored into it. I can't say that I grew up with a desire to work in a prison or a jail. I was working with high-risk teens at a residential teen and in their school. And I knew there had to be something meant for me aside from that, because teens weren't necessarily my specialty. A couple weeks later, I got an interview with the prison, and I'm like, what do I have to lose? Why not? Sure. And yeah, the culture was incredibly different. You know, there was not any cultural awareness where I grew up. There was just a lot of sameness and likeness in my little tiny community. So it was a completely different culture. And they're also in this little town, you know, we grew up, I could probably count on one hand how many times we locked our farmhouse when we left because like crime just wasn't a thing there. And if it was just really piddly stuff, you know, nothing major. So that was a whole different like learning scenario. And when it comes to like the culture, there's one individual that I really attribute my cultural awareness and learning to, and it was a probation partner I had. So after the prison, I went and worked probation with high-risk felony offenders in North Omaha, which is largely African-American, and then different gangs are seated in there as well. And my partner was amazing. Like, could ask him anything about anything, and he saw my desire to want to learn and to want to know and to want to connect, even if I didn't have the most mature or appropriate words or language around that. So he was such a godsend, and I really feel like he was one of the earth angels in my path. But I didn't encounter him until, you know, after my time working in the prison. I worked there for about 1.5 years, and I was a caseworker. It was for a work release facility. So there were people there for all sorts of crime, including murder, but they had worked their security level down or risk level down to being able to be eligible for work in the community or close to that, where they could, you know, have furloughs, they could go to church community or have passes out in the community. And so they were lower risk offenders. We had both female and male in that facility. And then I decided to try out, I can't remember, apply, whatever the right terminology was, an interview to be on the emergency response team. So that team was responsible for riot suppression and any responding to any unrest and upheaval within the facilities. We also would schedule and conduct full housing shakedowns where we would search cells, a whole housing unit at a time. So we would send everyone to like Chow Hall or somewhere. And so they didn't see these searches coming. So those were the types of activities that team primarily did at the time that I was there. And we had the team lead actually get deployed. And so it ended up that they appointed me as the assistant team lead while he was on deployment. And I was so young, ladies, like looking back, I don't know, like I do know, because I'm just internally, I have leadership skills and I'm more like a quiet leader. So I do know what they saw in me, yet now being older and reflecting, I'm like, I didn't have experience. And, you know, if there was a riot or an upheaval of some sort, like that was going to be the team leader and I making those decisions to anyway, it's crazy, and it's sort of awesome, and it's scary. It's a little bit of a lot of things all at one time, but it also speaks to the system truly, because, you know, in the system I was working in, you don't retain employees long term who are really motivated and who want to be in those high stress situations. Like, working in a prison is high stress enough because you get mandatory to overtime. And if someone doesn't come in for the next shift and they're sick, you might have to stay and work a 16-hour shift or 12-hour shift or however it works out. And so it's really about like leveraging the manpower that is there. And there's just not enough employees especially in the prison system, to have a healthy work-life balance.
So I have a question because, excuse me, we do work with a lot of returning citizens. So I think just this will be helpful. Do you within the system? I know we spoke briefly about it. The fairness, even being an officer, and some of the things that you see, the fairness to the inmates. How did you how do you feel the fairness, and being someone that wanted to help? How did you navigate through that? If you've seen unfairness?
Gosh, that is such a great question. So at my young age, I was really focused on what I did. And they trained us in the academy, you know, be firm, fair, and consistent, firm, fair, and consistent, firm, fair, and consistent. And so I'm not sure if they knew, like, really telling Janessa to be firm, what they were telling her to be, because my firm was really, really firm. Like, I know how it works. Like, you give people an inch and they take a mile, or whatever the saying is, right? And they really told us in the academy, you know, the relationships that form in prison and the sexual conduct that happens between inmates and staff. And I'm like, I don't want to make myself available for any of that. I'm just going to go in and be really firm. But I have to say that when it came to other staff members and seeing bias or partial behavior given to certain people, I didn't do anything. I'll just be honest. And I think that I know that if I were in that situation now, that would be different for me. But I was really young and I was learning. And so I really just showed up focused on what can I do in my interactions. And for me, that was, you know, I can't remember how many people were housed in this facility, but learning every single one of their names and calling every single one of them by name, like they are human, and giving that respect, and living that code of being firm, fair, and consistent. And I did not have any issues of like flirtation or harassment or any of that. And I really do believe that while perhaps I was a little rigid coming in, not knowing any different at the time, I do believe that the way that one conducts themselves really does set the tone for the way that you interact with any population of people.
I'm sorry. I'm up next. Now, I guess how do I want to put this? I'm not sure of, you know, your natural personality outside of this podcast, but I'm sure you had to kind of harden up a little bit to be able to work around certain individuals, or, you know, just try to get your foot in there. Did you find it hard to, you know, kind of acclimate to, you know, just being in that environment, or, you know, did you fare well just kind of, you know, being yourself, whether that was, you know, just kind of timid into yourself, or, you know, did you feel that you had to make changes in order to adapt?
So I don't know that I ever felt timid. And I was really naive, and naive can be bliss, as they say. But I'll tell a story of one of the first like firm, fair, and consistent exercises Janessa encountered. We had to inspect the rooms, the cells of the inmates every single day. So I went around and I did inspections, and it was like, is their bed made? Are all of their clothes in their wardrobe? Is the dust neat? Is everything put away? And I cannot remember like if this inmate had his boots out, there was something. I docked a point. And he met me in the hallway very respectfully. Like, I want to talk to you about my room inspection. Okay. Now, behind the scenes, before I tell you how this conversation went, what I did not yet understand is that the scores of those daily room inspections all got tallied up and went into making them eligible to be in the community. So it was a big deal to them. And to me, I'm just like, oh, it's just this daily collateral task. Somebody has to grade and score their rooms, what condition, cleanliness, whatever. This is my bar. This is my bar. Like, this is what is perfect, and this is what is just disgraceful, and then all of the in between. And I did have an employee like walk me around the first time and kind of tell me how they did it. And but there was not any necessarily uniformity between all of the people. Like, it wasn't something that all of the staff were taught to do it a certain way. You just got taught by who you got taught with. So there's this man, this behemoth of a man. He's probably like 6'5", very muscular, as are a lot of inmates. I believe he was in like a motorcycle gang when he was out on the street. He was in for murder. And he's like, I want to know why my score was docked. And I'm like, oh, your boots were out, whatever. And he's like, well, Miss Finley, my boots have been out for however many months or whatever he had been there, and I always got a top score. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, that's not okay with me, right? So like, I'm firm. I'm standing my ground. But, I was pretty protective, rigid, right? This is in my era of coming out the other side of the eating disorder, being really guarded, really protective of myself, not being very open, not having great relationships with people. Relationships are really surface level in my personal life and not very fulfilling. And so I was not necessarily like, I was fair, but I wasn't necessarily empathetic to understanding the other side of it, or even the impact and ramification. And I can remember at what point it was explained to me that those scores really did matter for really big things for them. I'm like, oh, well, maybe there's a better way that I could approach this, like ask them or talk to them before just, dogging something so minor. Misconduct behavior, completely different situation. If there was contraband in the room, completely different situation. But I mean, if somebody's boots are out, maybe talking to them like they're a whole grown human would be a great approach to that. So I had to kind of settle into what did firm, fair, and consistent look like for me, within being also reasonable. I wouldn't want somebody checking my bedroom even now today and grading me for how my whole room looks like. But that wasn't something that at that time I even considered what it would be like being on the other side of that.
So how long did you work in the jail? And I wanted to know, at some point, did you become sympathetic to some of the things the inmates were going through?
Not extremely sympathetic. I was there for a pretty short time. It was only about 18 months. And then I went on, applied to be probation officer, and went on and worked in probation for a total of about 10 years between probation and drug court. It's kind of short answer, but it's the truth. Like my empathy, sympathy, insight definitely came with age and also quite a lot with my husband's situation. So now looking back, I see things much differently. But until I was on both sides of the desk and I was only on one side of the desk, I really only saw it one way.
Now, did you, I guess, find any further or more fulfillment being a probation officer, or was that just kind of just another notch on the belt too?
No, I really did. And there are some people, while I worked in probation, the majority, not all, but the majority of my offenders had an underlying addiction of some sort. So their crime may not have been drug related, but there was an addiction that led to the theft or what put them on probation. I will still hear from different people here and there who are still sober, whose lives were impacted really positively during that time. And that definitely had a lot more fulfillment. I feel like it also had a lot more stress because it was, if someone was violating their probation, at what point is the community no longer safe? And I am the one that needs to make that decision, typically. I never had a judge not stand behind when I did violate someone. I was also on call 24/7 as a probation officer. So there were different stressors that were really draining to me. But by and large, it was much more fulfilling, a different relationship built with the individuals. You worked with them for years typically. And so really getting to see them prosper and find their empowerment was really, really, really fulfilling.
Okay. So I just heard you mention that your husband was incarcerated. So being a probation officer, I want to jump into that. Mm-hmm. And how did it lead to, and the title of this is Love Behind Bars. So how did it lead into, I guess, you and your husband dating and, or maybe him getting incarcerated?
Yeah. So the timeline of that, and this whole story, the whole story is so long. It's a couple hours. And if people are more interested in hearing the inner working details, they can find that on my website. With my radio show, I've talked extensively about what led to his incarceration. But to set the scene, the stage, I was working for the Department of Homeland Security at the time. And he and I had been together for almost 5 years. We were engaged. We had gotten engaged about 6 months prior to the FBI showing up outside of our house, running surveillance. I blew their cover, and it was on Valentine's Day of all days. So I was with him, and that's the thing that I feel like that is heard a lot or seen in the news anyway, is people who fall in love in prison, or, you're working in the prison and there are those relationships that form that had absolutely nothing to do with my scenario whatsoever. And prior to this, my husband was completely law-abiding citizen. So he was investigated for a tech crime. There were 5 different tech devices connected to one Instagram account where threats, and I'm air quoting it only because of the First Amendment, and it does not seem that the context of the comments online would not have been protected by the First Amendment. It's neither here nor there. He accepted a plea agreement. He's taken accountability. So I'm really not here to dissect all of those details. But if people are interested in it, like I said, I've gotten into and shown the evidence and everything on different platforms that you can find on my website. So when the FBI showed up, I really, really felt they knew something I didn't. He had to likely have been lying to me. I just believe so much in the system. And I had been not on the prosecuting side of crimes, but on the back end with probation, and even in the prison system for so long. I believed in it. I believed in that system. I believed in that system to always get it right. And I think that there's so much shame attached to being incarcerated, being in the system, being, labeled a felon or a criminal. And that was something that I just adamantly feel like I want to speak out against and be a trendsetter against. There's no reason to live under the shame of something and be silent and quiet because of it. And so in my own personal process of going through the trauma of being a law-abiding citizen and having the FBI show up outside of my house, that really rocked my safety and security for me personally. And then just different elements of the case as it played forward. He lost his job. There was national news campaigns about his case specifically. There were a lot of things that really rocked me and my belief system. And I really began, like, as some people say, like the veil fell. I began to see things very differently, and the interconnectedness of different systems and the way that different things worked that I had never been part of my experience in life prior to this. So at the end of the day, I knew that I had to get really, really real with myself. So as you've heard me talk about, my relationships, I didn't have those relationships for a long period of time. And old me would have ran from this so fast. And I thought, okay, who do I need to be true to myself and true to my partner? And also, like, the more I dug into this, I was called as a witness because we weren't married. So I started digging into his case and looking at things from that objective standpoint. And the pieces of the puzzle just, they didn't come to, like, the math didn't math. And he never wavered from the very beginning that he didn't do it. But before I came to that conclusion, I drew a different conclusion, which was, if I want to be unconditionally loved, I need to give unconditional love. And what would unconditional love be? Unconditional love in this scenario, like, I think there would be deal breakers crime-wise, almost any crime, but not necessarily this one with the way that it played out. I said that even if you did it, if you learn from the mistakes, I will walk with you through this. And that was what I determined unconditional love to be for me. And then as things played forward, and the more I learned and the more I saw how the case was being handled, I had more and more and more question marks and fewer and fewer and fewer answers about anything. And it made it a lot easier for me to believe him. And dishonesty wasn't a part. Like, I know I said repeatedly with my first marriage, my dishonesty with him in my first marriage really eroded that marriage and caused a lot of problems. And walking away from that marriage, I knew that it could not be a part of my relationships going forward. And so honesty is really something that my relationship with my husband is built upon. And so I knew he had not, like, I've never caught him in a lie. It's just not a part of who we are as a couple. And so not only did I stay with him, and we believed that he would get probation because he had no prior crimes and he was really low risk and lots of different factors, but that didn't happen. They sentenced him to 18 months in prison. And they gave him 90 days between his sentence to report, to drive himself to prison and to go to prison. So within those 90 days, we chose to move forward and also get married. And so we were married for 3 entire weeks before he went to prison and served his sentence. And so then the beginning of our marriage, while it was not the beginning of our relationship, the beginning of our marriage was built upon letters and 15-minute phone calls with a recording that constantly interrupts you and a bad connection as the means of which our relationship was and communication was built upon.
Wow, that's a sucky situation. Like, what is the best way I can put that? That's horrible. So, well, I know he didn't do it, but the court found him guilty here.
Well, he took a plea agreement. Like, to be clear, there was no trial. No, there was really short timelines with getting an attorney. There was really short timeline with taking the plea agreement. And so we hedged against the 0 criminal history and believe that, you know what, when you've fight a case in federal court, you usually go broke, and it drags on forever, and it depletes all of your resources and all of your everything. And he should get probation, and we should get to go on with our lives. And yeah, probation won't be the normal routine that we're used to, but it's doable. And let's just take the plea, because he was originally facing 5 years. So yeah. So took the plea agreement. And I just want to be very clear, in accountability, I think that's really important to me. And I know, like, I'm not trying to split hairs with you by any means, but yeah, like he took accountability for the crime. And so the court never found him guilty per se, but that's semantics, perhaps.
No, yeah, I'd clear that up too, because definitely. Now, what, I guess at what point, in this process, whether it was while he was incarcerated or after the fact, when did you go into your advocacy? And, I guess what was the kind of defining moment where you knew that, this is something that you do want to advocate for and fight against and, be a voice for?
When the only way the story would piece together was in mind-bending and boggling situations. And when I sat down, because like I said, I was subpoenaed as a witness, when I sat down and talked with them and laid all the details out there, and they weren't concerned with what I was telling them, what they wanted to know was how I knew it. And that seemed really off. And I wasn't interrupted a lot in that interview, but I was interrupted to be asked, how do you know what you know? And so that felt really, really off to me. And then when I felt prompted to write his story and publish his story, the more I dug into the different parts as I was publishing the evidence and, showing these are the things I saw, form your own conclusions. I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. I started, digging into statistics of wrongfully accused people. And depending on the study you read, it's somewhere between 6 and 12%. We're talking like 100,000 people. We're talking trillions of dollars a year spent on people wrongfully incarcerated. That's mind-blowing. And living the effect of that, seeing how it's impacted my husband's life, being a step removed, knowing how it's impacted me, and knowing that there's that ripple, his family, my parents, my family, our friends, times 100,000 people. That's a lot of people being injured, hurt by the justice system. And we're also not seeing rehabilitation that really does much for recidivism rates. And then we could talk about the things I learned about with COVID and how they released some people to go home during COVID with certain scenarios, and how minimal the, I call it violation because of probation, but violation of the terms. There weren't very many people that failed at home serving their sentence from home. And it just seems like these mass incarcerations are likely another means for financial compensation for certain systems and people.
Were you a probation officer during the time your husband was incarcerated?
No, so I was working for the Department of Homeland Security for almost 10 years prior to this happening. And I left the department the same month that he began his incarceration.
Okay. Was that by choice or voluntary leave?
I never had any disciplinary. I didn't have any brushback or issues, but I was a highly awarded officer. I had great rapport with the people I worked with. There's a lot of accountability, and I never had any issues with anything personally because of what he was experiencing.
Okay. So I have one more question and we're almost at time. Did others know that your husband was incarcerated at work?
Well, So again, the timeline, I left work before he was incarcerated.
Mhm.
When I was leaving work, I did tell people that I was close with that had happened. But keep in mind, there were some really interesting things in that plea agreement that he signed. He can't have the evidence that was used against him. He couldn't ever deny guilt. So we couldn't tell our story. We were afraid that he would get, the full 5 years if we spoke our side of the story while he was going through that. So until he was sentenced, I didn't feel like I could talk about it. I was afraid that that would have implication on him. And so my silence in the situation with friends and peers and whatnot was really because of that legal document, not my choice.
Got it. That's not fair, but got it. The system never plays fair with anyone. So we are at time. I'm gonna ask, and Sid's gonna kick off the last question. Is there any advice that you can give anyone, especially I guess someone that's going through a challenging time with incarcerated, or they have someone that's a companion to someone that's incarcerated? What advice would you give motivating to help them through the challenges?
Well, for sure, have support around you, whatever that can look like for each individual that's going through the situation. A support is literally make it or break it for me and my personal experience. But I also want to inspire, part of the work that I do and the lessons that I learned in life. And I feel like all of my background really kind of compiled because prior to leaving the department, I had started studying energy psychology. I got certified in energy psychology and mindset. And it's such an important part of our being, processing our emotions, keeping our mindset in alignment with where we're headed. And power can be found in all places. There's polarizing, there's the things that we want to do and the things we don't want to do. There's the expression, there's repression. And I would say that, incarceration is really an extreme form of suppression, repression. Power can be found there. Power can be found anywhere. And so if you have a means to know that even when you're going through something uncomfortable and something that you would not choose to go through, there's a process to actually cultivate power in that situation, you're going to come out the other side a better person, not bitter, but better than having not gone through it. And that is at everybody's disposal. Everybody has the ability to turn these difficult situations into something that is going to elevate them if they so choose. And so that's really my message of hope and inspiration. And also to speak to the point of not getting trapped in the shame stigma. Be you, speak out, live your truth, live your story. There's people who need to hear that. There's people who need to know what you're going through because it's relatable or it's going to support them in some way. And don't let the shame keep you silent.
Wise words to live by. So we do like to call this part shameless plug. We see all of your information scrolling across the bottom here. Let our viewers know how they can utilize their services, contact you, ask any questions. You can let the viewers know about anything you want to draw traffic to, anything that you have coming up as events, anything you have for sale, anything you want to shine a light on, you have the floor.
Awesome. Thank you. So I really love working with people in all different ways. So I have something for everyone. And as you hear, I have had an interesting life of adversity, and it's through all of these different experiences that I have become so expertise in being able to traverse adversity and come out shining bright like a diamond. And so whether you're going through a major career shift, or someone in your family lost their job, or divorce, or an eating disorder, or an addiction, or incarceration, or being in the justice system, or trauma, right? Or I have such an interesting background and have traversed so many different adversities that I'm so well equipped to walk with others through that adversity when they don't know how to find that power in the challenge, that I help teach them and guide them to find their power. And also being so trauma informed and so trained in so many different types of trauma, I also can help people facilitate trauma healing for themselves that's really lasting and freeing and liberating. And it allows them to shine radiantly and to have their own version of my story of having the challenges that they had prior to the trauma healing, and then to be their radiant self and to really live their authentic and truth after that trauma is no longer a factor in their life. So that is really the heart of the work that I love to do with people. And I do that. There are one-on-one opportunities. You can go to my website, www.fiercelyradiantsoul.com. There's a free 30-minute consultation. Book it. Have a conversation with me. We can determine if individual, if group healing. I work with another colleague who's a shamanic healer, a crystal healer, and an earth medicine practitioner. We put all of our expertise together in one place, and it's really fantastic to support people in living a holistic lifestyle. So being healthy, mind, body, and soul. So that is available. My courses are available. There's a lot available. So jump on the call. Literally, don't let me break your brain with all of the options. Just get on the call with me, and we will determine what meets you where you are and what is going to build that bridge from where you are to where you want to be in the quickest and best way for you individually.
Thank you so much, Janessa. Thank you for being transparent and bringing awareness to so many other topics through your life experience on Unfiltered Unspoken. So we definitely appreciate it. So for our audience, if anyone is going through traumas as a child, or if you have experienced an eating disorder, or you have someone that you love, your significant other, and you're going through that with them through a challenging time being incarcerated. Hopefully, Janessa's testimony brought some light, and her life experience will help you start the journey to healing. And thank you for tuning in to Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast, where we're going to continue to share life experiences. Ain't that right, Ted?
That's right.
That's right. And thank you, Janessa, again for being a guest on Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.